Bryan, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as
For
well.
the first time.
I know.
Hi everyone. We are celebrating the 20th birthday of Agoda. And for that occasion, we are meeting a lot of the founders of Agoda.com, and I have the privilege to be with Bryan Lewis, who held many functions in our company, including the CFO role. Bryan, I'm very excited to meet you, and I'd like to know, can you share with us what you've been up to after Agoda?
Sure. I was briefly the CFO of Priceline.com for about a year. Spent a couple more years in the group working on the fintech strategy that actually we see kind of rolling out today. And then while at Agoda, I developed a real passion for online marketplaces and on the kind of price and margin optimization of marketplaces. You can think about like the ranking, right? The hotel ranking at Agoda. And I've worked then across a bunch of different industries, particularly in healthcare and pharmacy.
And anything more exciting than Agoda?
And nothing could ever be more exciting than Agoda. That's true. That's the honest truth. Lots of other startups, lots of other really interesting people. But nothing will ever compare.
Nothing compares?
Nothing will ever compare again, for sure.
All right. How would you describe the early days at Agoda?
I would say very close-knit. It was a very small, right? Obviously, it was a startup, so it was small. There were not very many of us. And yeah, just a very close-knit sort of family atmosphere that was also obviously incredibly chaotic and challenging, right? It was an exciting work day. I couldn't wait to come to work every day. Yeah.
I can imagine. Is there any funny or unexpected story from your time that you still remember today? I'm guessing there are many, but is there one that comes to mind?
I mean, there are, of course, hundreds of stories. I think, like a lot of the early people, one of my main memories when we were having the coup in Thailand right outside of our office, and we had to frantically pack up the office, like wading through the people with their, burning tires and pitchforks with the army outside, riding around with the servers on the back of a moped. That I consider to be, we reset up in a hotel around the corner from my house, and we all operated the whole company out of an Italian restaurant for, 3 or 4 months, a while. It felt like forever.
I actually heard that story.
It's a common one. It was a memorable moment.
So you held multiple roles at Agoda, right? Very impressive. So you were, at the same time, I think you were the CFO, you were the CMO, you were the Chief Commercial Officer, of course, one of the founders. So how did you juggle all those responsibilities, and what did you learn from wearing all those hats?
I'm a finance person foremost, always was, and hired as a CFO at a difficult time in Agoda's the Agoda startup phase, where we were losing money, and really our survival was really in question. So I ended up kind of absorbing marketing and the other functions just as a function of necessity and the need to exert some control over the finances of the company. So mostly, honestly, right, I focused on building a really good team of people who knew what they were doing. I focused primarily on finance. The marketing team was always led by particularly the paid advertising group was always led by somebody extremely competent. Honestly, I addressed most problems from a finance perspective, and I think it really helped in the early days to have, given the size of the marketing, the size of the marketing expense line, and the need to perpetually kind of optimize that for whatever the financial goals or objectives were. Having that under the same roof made life a lot easier.
And actually, it did work, right? Because see what the company is now, right? So it did scale.
It definitely worked. Yes.
Yeah. So have you been following Agoda's journey from wherever you are in the world now?
Always.
Okay. And if yes, what's one thing that you've seen in Agoda today, and how far the company has come? Anything that is noteworthy?
Right. I mean, a relatively unique perspective to look at Agoda from afar. Right. I still see the seeds of things that were planted 20 years ago. A relentless focus on price, I can just observe that. I don't have to talk to, I still have friends working at Agoda. I don't have to talk to them to know how it's going. I can see the relentless focus in price. And I perpetually book on Agoda because it's mostly the cheaper option.
Right.
Certainly the fintech focus, I'm still in the fintech space, and I talk a lot to other fintech players, and Agoda is certainly the most admired fintech player in the travel space. I see the LinkedIn posts, I see all these things, and yeah, it's like having a child that went to Harvard or something, right? I'm just incredibly,
nice.
You know what I mean? I mean, I am.
It's like you're proud.
I am incredibly right. I am always incredibly proud. And yeah, certainly, the leadership team there now. This is the first time you and I have met, but Marie and that group of people, their company Clicka was the very last thing I did before I left was acquire Clicka. So I'm incredibly proud to see that come to fruition and have such a strong leadership team. Yeah, I very much sense the culture. Of course, it's much bigger and more complicated, but I can feel the core of Agoda is not different.
Great to hear. So Agoda is really fond of acronyms. Is there any favorite ones that you still remember or that you still use, but perhaps?
Trust me, I feel very confident. I remember what all the acronyms. Hope someone has come up with better names. By the time, the kind of custom build booking engine we had was called EBE.
Oh, it still exists,
Crazy. So, right, I was there for EBE. I don't know what version it must be.
We still call it EBE.
Okay, well.
It still exists.
So there we go.
I
launched EBE1, EBE1, and YCS1. Is it still called YCS?
It's still called YCS.
I always felt those acronyms were unfortunate. But those two systems really formed the core of Agoda. I'm pleased to hear the acronyms still persist.
We didn't change them. Any lessons that you learned at Agoda that you carried throughout your career?
I only have one tattoo, right? I don't have one tattoo. It's here on my arm. I don't know if you can read that or not, or if it's mirrored. But it's the Go from Agoda.
Oh,
it's the Go from Agoda.
I can see it now. Yep.
And
wow.
And that's what I learned. I think most of all that I try and carry forward is that you can spend a lot of time thinking about like what might go wrong or what's a good idea. Is this a bad idea? Should we go? Should we do this? Should we not do this? You can talk yourself out of almost anything. What I learned most of all from Agoda, and that the lesson I try and pass to people or companies that I work with today is just go and trust yourself and trust your team to solve the problems that arise on the fly. Don't spend all the time thinking about it. Just start. Just whatever it is.
How would you describe Agoda's evolution over the past 20 years?
I think inevitably, the company, right? When I started, there were 70 people. When I left, there were a couple thousand. I don't know how many people there are now.
Close to 8,000 now.
8,000, right?
Close to 8,000.
I think I was going to say 3,000. It seemed like too much, but I think there were 3,000 people when I left. So it grew, 40x in the time that I was there.
Yeah.
And inevitably, there's just more corporate stuff, right? You're like, okay, we've got, the just sort of corporate structure, right? It's a long way away from we're driving around with a company on the back of a moped. But the spirit of the company persists, and I find it just incredibly rewarding to see that. The focus on the people, the willingness to invest in talent, the willingness to experiment and try new things and fail sometimes. I'm really proud of Agoda. No matter what I do after, I'll never have that. I flipped that switch and then suddenly I knew that one day you and I would be having this conversation. That's how I felt.
You actually dreamt it.
That's how I felt, right? I feel like the original Rob and Yost and all of us, I feel like we dreamt the company into existence, and I find it incredibly satisfying to observe. It's just run with, smarter people, honestly, right? Smarter people who have picked up where we left off and expanded into ways that I, never thought they would.
Quite nice to see that the DNA that you described is actually still with us after 20 years. And maybe we're gonna have another discussion in 20 more years, and then
the drafting of the original Agoda DNA document, right? I contributed, in a not small way to a lot of those things, and I can perceive those things still persisting today. It's really rewarding.
Yeah, can imagine. Any last words, Bryan, for all of the Agoda employees that are celebrating the 20th anniversary?
First, I'm very confident, right? I'm very confident you're working for an amazing company, and I would really encourage you to pause and appreciate it. It's a hard knock world out there outside of Agoda, right? It is the culture of of speed and innovation and success is more difficult than you might imagine to find outside of Agoda. And I encourage everybody to not just focus on all the endless sort of like daily battles and competition, but also to look around and realize that you're in an elite group of people doing an amazing job. Of course, there are not small number of people that I hired still working at Agoda. And to you, I would say, right? Hello.
Hello.
And I hello. And I miss you all. Yeah.